Anne-France Whitman from UNDP, based in Morocco, but she'll be telling us about a program in that region. And then we have Vincent Ziba from Zimbabwe, who will be telling us about some of his work. Zambia. But then after that, we'll take one or two questions or comments on those presentations, and then we will move into a more general discussion, and I want to prime you a little bit about what that will consist of, so that you can prepare yourselves. I will invite people afterwards, after the presentation part of it is over, to give us just very short 2-minute, and not more than 2 minutes, please, feedback and impressions from you on the conference, what you learned, and in particular, don't describe the conference. If you have any criticisms or feedback on the format and the content, we would like to hear that, but we'd like you to let us know either in an email or write it down on a piece of paper and give it to us. We want your feedback on the conference itself, but in the plenary, what I'd like you to focus on is what are you taking back from this. So a personal reflection on something you've learned, something that you will take back with you to do when you go back to your work. So a little bit of personal reflection. We'll take as many as we can. That's why I'm asking people to make them short before we break for tea. So that'll be an open plenary where we will ask for feedback from all of you, or as many of you as we can. Okay, so I'm going to start the proceedings by inviting first Anne-France Whitman from UNDP to share with us the work that she has been doing. Anne?
Good morning, everyone. It's a true pleasure to start this final day with you. It's a challenge too, after so many things have been said. I will today share with you some of our global experience on community mobilization in the perspective of scaling up CBA, based on the UNDP GEF CBA program. I'm coordinating the program in Morocco, but I will talk on a more global basis. Our program is a UNDP pilot initiative funded by the Global Environment Facility, using the small grants mechanism as a funding channel directly to CBO and NGOs. The program is supported by UN volunteers at the global and country levels, and it is implemented in 10 pilot countries where we have 55 community projects generating lessons and practices for dissemination at local, national and global levels. Our approach focuses on community involvement and inclusive participation, starting at project development and design. During project design, local knowledge and experience are captured and incorporated in projects, supported, of course, by scientific and technical input. We use and train our CBO partners to use a number of participatory tools, including CARE's CVCA, for example. We also have our own multipurpose tools, such as the Vulnerability Reduction Assessment, which is a perceptions-based assessment and project development tool that is also used for monitoring all along the project. In Guatemala, specifically, we also implement what is called the Almanario, which is a 100% participatory, step-by-step project design and planning tool that has been created by Small Grants Program in Guatemala to reach out to the indigenous communities. These tools allow to tailor projects to local realities and experiences, and to reach, through an inclusive participatory implementation, to reach the needs of the most vulnerable. This ensures full ownership of the projects and fosters involvement of volunteers in project implementation. We support 55 CBOs and NGOs. They mobilize 6,000 volunteers who contribute labor, skills, knowledge, leadership, building on traditional solidarity practices. Inclusion and cohesion are enhanced by concrete action, since all contributions are meaningful. Activities and action for adaptation allows everyone to contribute in the community, be they youth, elders, women, farmers, people with disabilities. This is a collective empowerment process. It's a capacity building, and it's a learning by doing process that allows to make community members active participants instead of just passive recipients of help. One of our good experiences is the self-help groups in Namibia, which are organized volunteers implementing adaptation activities, but also putting in common savings to ensure sustainability of their project, and acting as a platform for knowledge sharing, capacity building, and also mentoring. In order to be even more powerful, especially in the perspective of upscaling and dissemination, this volunteer contribution is measured thanks to a UNV tool that was specifically produced and tested for CBA to organize, capture, measure, and mainstream community involvement. This allows also to estimate the community in-kind contribution, which is counted as co-funding in our projects. It is a powerful way to recognize communities' contribution and give them visibility and recognition as partners. It is also a way to enhance self-confidence in the community and motivation. To give you an example, this is actually quite invisible. It's a community contribution chart to show you from one specific project in Morocco, the community in-kind contribution can match up and even be higher than traditional partners such as GIZ's contribution. So this is a very powerful message also for communication. These concrete contributions of volunteers achieve concrete adaptation results already. In Niger, for example, in a context of historic drought and food insecurity, quick maturing seeds that have been implemented for the past 2 years have allowed to improve production and livelihood in the communities. Another example in Samoa, where wetland protection and rehabilitation have protected communities from devastating floods last year. And in Namibia, during the midterm vulnerability assessment, 7 communities expressed their increased adaptive capacities after 1 year of implementation of conservation agriculture. One of the tools that we support to give global echo to local initiatives is the participatory video, which fosters inclusive mobilization at the community level to capture local experience, local knowledge about climate change, and to document adaptation techniques and achievements. It is a way to empower the community in terms of advocacy and in terms of formulating and voicing out messages and testimonies from the most vulnerable to the decision makers and donors. We have so far supported 3 participatory videos in Morocco, Niger, and Samoa, which have been disseminated at the local level to other communities, but also at national and global levels. In terms of upscaling and dissemination, communities have a strong potential for inspiration and for influence. Inspiration, first of all, of other communities through dissemination of adaptation techniques and solutions based on concrete results and experience, through community-to-community exchanges, mentoring, fostering South-South cooperation. Communities also have a potential to influence CBO and NGO empowerment in terms of partnership building and advocacy is a good way to mainstream CBA. Besides the mobilization of partners, in the entire process. It's a learning together process for CBA that we are supporting. This mobilization allows to mainstream CBA participatory approaches, processes, and lessons in development practices and also planning. And finally, the promotion of community contribution through lively testimonies, life stories, portraits, participatory video can also allow to reach and share message to at the global level. A few words of conclusion would be that community inclusive mobilization is a rich process generating powerful messages and lessons to support and to contribute to scaling up and disseminating and also mainstreaming CBA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to just stay there and maybe take one or two questions or comments. Does anybody have a question or a comment for Anne? Yes, please. If you could identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Katie. I work with Oxfam Australia in the Solomon Islands, and I've been really interested to hear about this project. I've been talking to Anne and Adeline and others about it over the last week. And I guess it's a pilot project in the 10 countries. Are there plans to take it further afield?
Thanks, Katie. Yes, indeed. This is a pilot program that has been running in 10 countries, and it is now reaching midterm. And for further developments, maybe I can give over to project coordinator Charles Nyandiga, if he wants to speak, or Fumiko.
Charles, are you in the room?
Yes.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to add a little bit on what Anne-France is saying, it is a pilot, and we are hoping that the lessons coming from this pilot is going to inform another phase-out of community-based adaptation programming. And yes, there are considerations for upscaling. It's not determined how this is going to be done, but the process is in place.
Great, very much. Thank you very much. And if anybody's interested, Charles, would you mind just standing up so people know who you are, if they haven't met you already? Charles Nyandiga from UNDP in New York. Get in touch with him and he can give you more information. Thank you, Charles. I'll take one more. Nick, and then maybe Pablo, if you can be short. If Nick can be short, Pablo gets a turn. Otherwise, Pablo doesn't get a turn.
Okay, I've got the message. Thank you, Nick Hall with Plan. I think that the measurement of community contributions and the valuation of that is really an innovative approach. I know it's been done elsewhere, but one of the my question is, has UNDP sort of formally recognised this valuation? So many donors demand co-funding, but very rarely do they accept a community contribution as something more than just voluntary work. So I'd be interested to hear about the formal recognition of that.
Who wants to take this on behalf of UNDP, Charles or Fumiko? Is Fumiko in the room? Do you want to respond to that, Fumiko?
Yes, good morning. I'm also working on this project as a UNDP, and I also would like to acknowledge the support coming from the Global Environment Facility, which actually allows us to integrate the contribution coming from communities, both in cash and in kind. And this is actually extremely important scheme to recognize in-kind contribution from the communities, because that is really the way to ensure the sustainability and ownership of the communities. So if this could be a sort of a model for future, the mobilization or leveraging of co-financing, we would be delighted to share our experiences. So contact us individually and bilaterally through emails or after this session. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Pablo, last point.
Thank you. I'd love to be short when I get on planes. So if anyone has a recipe for chopping off legs temporarily, let me know. There's been experiences on video and climate change since at the minimum 2004, when Salim's team organized the Development and Climate Days in Buenos Aires COP, and we were showing videos from shanty towns in Argentina. There's been a lot since then, and we keep showing fantastic videos that serve very short-lived purposes from the perspective of the collective scaling up endeavor. I don't know how, I know we can try, but it's time now, after 8 years of experience, to systematize, to institutionalize, to bring in those who are not CBA practitioners, but are filmmaking practitioners, trainers, university students, and so on. We have 3 journal articles, guidelines, all sorts of things, but how do we make so that every CBA can help every community? And this needs this is a really low-hanging fruit for this community to scale up. Let's talk. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much for those interventions, comments. I'm going to now invite Vincent to give his presentation.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to share with you an approach that has been tested and very similar to CBA. This is what we call community-based natural resource management. This is a project that has been funded by WWF Norway in Southern Africa. And I'll share a little bit about some experiences on how it has been scaled up. It's a project that has been running, I think, for the past 20 years with other donors inclusive. So my presentation will briefly talk about what CBNRM is all about and the basic principles of CBNRM and the upscale that we have seen. So for those who do not know what CBNRM is all about, CBNRM is basically a tool that has been applied in natural resource-rich areas and where we crave for community to be empowered to manage their own resources sustainably, and where we put in measures for the community themselves to sustainably get the benefit of that resource with the government. So we have 2 aspects of resource management and benefit sharing at the center of CBNRM. And this is against the background that most rich resources have been controlled by governments, and most of the benefits are not appreciated by the communities that do the management at that level. So CBNRM comes in to claim the powers from the government and then put in place measures for sustainable management by the community. And this actually is against the background that once the community realizes the value from the natural resource, they can manage that resource. So the basic principles of CBNRM, similar to CBA, are this is community-based, and that's where the action happens. And it's also based on the natural resource use. So be it wildlife, be it forestry, be it fisheries, that's like the core business where you do your activities. And also it's based on effective benefit sharing mechanisms, and it's also to do with the devolution of power, which entails institutional arrangements to be rearranged at that level. Then we also have resource monitoring. Actually, I'll share a little bit more when it comes to scaling up, because we've developed a tool. Actually, WWF US developed a tool for monitoring, which has been accepted by nations like Namibia at the national level for managing of wildlife. The 4 principles I just put around there that is basically centered on institutional governance, financial, and natural resource use. I also tried to look at how do we relate CBNRM to climate change. Actually, there's been some discussions to say where CBNRM has been effectively used, it also mitigates some of the climate change impacts. I just wanted to share a little bit there, that you find that in areas where natural resource use has been well managed, it serves as a better coping strategy compared to agricultural systems at that level when hit by climate change disasters. And also, even if when everything is lost at that level, natural resource systems, actually they keep offering some of the ecosystem benefits at the community level. It's usually described as a coping strategy instead of being incorporated in the major livelihood strategy. The upscale. In the past 20 years in Southern Africa, we've had small examples of CBNRM by different organizations. We've had institutions like CLUSA, those who know it. They've been trying small bits of CBNRM activities here and there. But now, all these activities are being taken at a national level, and we've managed to influence policies. I'll look specifically for a case of Zambia. In Zambia, we got our independence in 1964, and everything was really centralized in terms of natural resource use. But now we're seeing the government has shifted attention to incorporating in the policies community involvement in the management. Like in wildlife, we have now what we call community resource boards. These are legal entities identified by government where the community will claim 50% share of the hunting licenses. We have now the joint forestry management committees. This is on pilot. It's been piloted in 3 provinces. But the government has accepted and is enshrined in the Forestry Act, where the community is entitled to 30% of the shares. And just last year, we also have managed to get the fisheries board, community fisheries boards in Luapula province, which is on the northern part, bordering with Tanzania. It's on a pilot, but it's in the government document, where the communities around the fisheries get the percentage from the licenses, the license fees that the government will collect. So those are some of the examples where government has adopted CBNRM. But how has it been done? Basically, it has been through peer reviews where we keep learning and discussing, and you bring the government on board, similar to this kind of approach that the CBA is taking, where you bring in different expertise and discuss various aspects that concern CBNRM. And then we also have tried to institutionalize CBNRM through training programs. I'll cite examples now. In Southern Africa, we have Rhodes University, which is offering a diploma course in CBNRM and professional courses. Then in Zambia, we've got the Mwekera Forestry College. Is offering a CBNRM course. We have actually now, we are commissioning just a short professional course to have as many people as possible, and we're targeting government institutions that are in line with natural resource use to take up CBNRM. Then, like I'd mentioned earlier on, we have a tool that we call MOMS, which is a management-oriented monitoring system. It has been institutionalized in the sense that a government institution responsible for wildlife has adopted it as their main monitoring system at community level. And this is a tool which has been developed by CBNRM. So we see those as strategies of upscaling, where we keep discussing and lobbying that the government puts it in the policy document. Actually, we had a constitutional review process in our country and Zimbabwe, and we challenged the different forums that have been developed to ensure that in the constitution itself, CBNRM should appear. But of course, we didn't manage, but it's a process of making sure that the major policy documents of the land incorporate CBNRM. Those are the successes that I mentioned already, like in Namibia, Zambia, we have all those registered community-based institutions which are upscaling CBNRM and the fisheries. In my conclusion, I looked at the upscale actually of CBA similar to CBNRM, where we look at all it's actually a multi-sectorial approach. I think in a similar way that we've been discussing over the past few days. And I noticed that it's actually in line. CBNRM and CBA are taking a similar pathway. And the other thing I've looked at is also to look at CBA can take advantage of CBNRM where it has been established, especially where we have these registered institutions already. Then we can easily upscale those activities of CBNRM with a CBA approach. Similarly, I looked at CBA can look at some of the challenges that CBNRM experienced to get where it is, where it has been established, as a process of avoiding the failures and making CBA to quickly have root in various countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. We can take one or two questions. Hannah, and then Bob.
Thanks, Vincent. That was fantastic. This is just an observation. I did my PhD on CBNRM in Southern Africa. And there was a guru at the time called Marshall Murphy who provided some analysis of CBNRM. And one of the points that he really made was that CBNRM is rarely done properly. At the time, much like climate change adaptation, it was a bandwagon. A lot of projects which weren't proper CBNRM, according to the principles that Vincent described, were labelled as CBNRM, and then later CBNRM by some people was labelled as being a failure when these projects failed. So I think this is a really good lesson for the CBA community here. There's some projects which you've seen over the last few days which maybe I wouldn't classify actually as CBA. And we have to be quite careful that jumping on the climate change bandwagon and defining everything as a climate change adaptation project or activity, we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, because then if they don't work out, we'll get shot down later by people saying, CBA doesn't work. This is something that I really felt very strongly after my studies on CBNRM in Southern Africa, and I think it's an important lesson here for the CBA community. It's a bandwagon, you know, there's a lot of learning and sharing we can do, but we also have to be careful when we jump on, that we jump on with the right shoes.
Thank you, Hannah. I'll take the next one from Bob, and if Vincent wants to make any remarks, I'll let him do that. Bob?
Bob Pockram from Australia. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Two questions. Could you describe the internal equitable benefit sharing mechanisms? How do they actually work internal to the community? And secondly, could you describe in more detail the mitigation benefits of your project? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, when it comes to benefit sharing mechanisms, what we have tried to lobby has been basically like in wildlife areas, wild conservation areas, has been on the license fees, because we realize that the communities that surround these areas have got a big role to play, and having institutions like CRBs claiming a share from the government revenues was one. But besides that, we've also tried to look at benefit sharing in terms of services. Yeah, the community is allowed to offtake a certain percentage of the resource itself. They can hunt up to about 10. There's an allowable allowance that the community in the surrounding areas are allowed to collect from, to extract from that resource. This is enshrined in the government laws. So that is, we may probably not call it equitable, but we fight for an equitable benefit sharing mechanism. As it is now, you find that the government institutions will say we put in more than the community does put in, you know, but the community will also claim some of the rights which you cannot cost and some of the services which you cannot cost. But somehow you're meeting somewhere compared to the way it used to be when it was a protected approach, where the community was not allowed at all to even hunt anything in the wildlife areas. Similarly, in the forestry protected areas. There's an allowable allowance. You can collect non-timber forestry products, and some of the benefits that you can collect in the forestry areas is allowed for the communities that are seen to be taking part in the protection. So it's maybe not equitable, but we crave for an equitable benefit sharing, but there is a mechanism in place. In terms of adaptation, I think you asked what kind of adaptation measures. In terms of adaptation measures, I should say we take what we call an ecosystem approach in CBNRIM. It may not necessarily be directly an adaptation strategy, but you find that where you do a sustainable natural resource use, because of the resilient nature of natural resources, you find that it makes the communities in those surrounding areas more resilient to communities who are outside the natural resource base. You cannot compare wildlife to livestock. There will be more heat than the wildlife. Similarly to the forestry and the agriculture, the cropping systems. So you find that it's more resilient, but really not directly as an adaptation measure, but it shows more resilience compared to agricultural systems. But we feel through CBNRM technologies, CBA technologies, CBNRM can be enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I'll take one quick additional one. Nambi?
I'm Nambi from the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, India. Between the two concepts of CBNRM and CBA, I don't know which preceded the other. But the thing is, why to add another acronym when there is a fairly established concept of CBA is there? I'm also afraid I'm raising this question because we are into this business of producing more and more acronyms and concepts. It is time to bring them everything under one roof because this is more, to the utmost, it gives a kind of institutional identity to me, that nothing, it serves no purpose if there is different elements reflected in these different concepts. I think it's high time. Yesterday we had a good discussion about the EBA and CBA differences. So it's important for us to, at least this conference should really take some step to bring under this, all these concepts under one umbrella. I think it's time for that. Thank you.
I'll take that as a comment and a suggestion and not ask for a response from Vincent. Okay. Can we thank both Anne and Vincent for their presentations? We have a good 45 minutes left for discussion, and as I said, I'm going to call on all of you to make your contributions in a few moments. But let me just give you a little bit of an overview from the organizers' point of view. We had a meeting of the organizers last night. We had a good 30 plus of them, even after dinner, staying late into the night. I thought everybody would be tired and want to go to bed, but the discussions went on quite late. And a few reflections from our side, and then I'm going to open the floor and let as many of you as possible to make your contributions. Firstly, a reflection on the length of the meeting. 7 days long is a pretty long meeting for people. The consensus, I think, that I have felt is that with the field visits thrown in for 3 days, it is very important that we retain that. Without the field visits, it is a different kind of meeting. It doesn't achieve everything that these meetings have been able to do. The field visits are an integral part. They are difficult to do, but nevertheless worth doing. And so in future, we will retain the 7-day-long format with the 3 days of field visits and then the conference. The second thing about the conference was that this time we allowed quite a large number of people join the conference for the conference only and not go to the field visits. That was a rule we had in the previous meetings, is that you came for 7 days or you didn't come. And you couldn't come for the last 3 days of the conference only. This time we broke that rule and we allowed quite a large number of people to come. I don't think that worked. It diluted the camaraderie that we used to have when everybody had been on the field. The meeting became too big, and I think in future we will now begin to insist again on it's either 7 days or nothing, and coming just for the last few days with very small exceptions to people who just simply can't afford that time. We will insist that they do the whole 7 days. I think that makes a huge difference in the atmosphere of the meeting, in the ability of people to network and get something out of it. The sessions that we had this time, we had 21 thematic sessions, both in plenary and in parallel. They seem to be quite lively, a lot of discussion, usual complaint about too many presentations and not enough time for discussion. It's a perennial problem. We are thinking about ways in which we can improve it, but everybody who comes to these events wants to share what they do, and it's very difficult to accommodate them all in presentations. We did start a poster session this time, which we had not done before. I think that went quite well. Yesterday we had the prizes for that. We will expand the posters in future and perhaps reduce the presentations and allow more time for discussion. I think that's a reflection that we would certainly take on board, and maybe find better, more creative ways of using that time for discussion. The other thing that we did this time, which we've never done before, is that we asked thematic session chairs not just to chair a session, but to do a lot more than that, is to draw the information, the discussion out into a chapter that can go into a book that is going to be published by EarthScan. This is a huge ask, and I'm very, very pleased to say most of them have agreed to it. We agreed a timeline last night that they would present their outlines of the chapters and the names of the authors and co-authors who have volunteered in a month's time, by the 1st of May, and that the first drafts would be available by the 1st of September so that we can deliver a draft manuscript to EarthScan by this year. The reason we chose this and we felt this was important is that, as many of you are already aware, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is embarking on its 5th assessment report, which is due out in 2014, and this time has a number of chapters on adaptation. And within those chapters, it does seek to find information on community-based activities. And that kind of literature in the peer-reviewed science literature is very, very scarce. And we felt that the body of knowledge that this community has acquired now deserves to reach the IPCC in some synthetic sense. But it can't be just descriptions, it has to be analytical. And that is the transition that we're trying to make here, from describing what we do to learning lessons from what we do. And hopefully with our authors and co-authors, we have the ability now to do that. One of my reflections on the 5th conference, as opposed to previous conferences, is that this is the first time we have attracted significant senior level academic researchers to our groups. In the past, we've had a lot of younger researchers who are very eager to learn about CBA, but we haven't attracted senior people. This time we have, and that to me is a significant phase change and ability that enhances our ability as a community to speak in the language of academia. For most people that may not be important, for some people that is important, and we want to reach them, and we hope that these academics who have come for the first time to a CBA conference will have found it a very useful experience. The ones I've spoken to have certainly told me that they have. As I said, the poster session has been an innovation which we will continue. The other innovation we tried this time, in light of the strong demand we had to come, and one of the reasons we expanded numbers was we had a huge demand, and we can't accommodate too many people. So we started webcasting. We invited One World, One Climate, Jamie and Danny, to come and do webcasting, which we've been doing live streaming. In the beginning, there weren't that many viewers, but over the course of the last 3 days, the viewership has increased. People out in the world are watching us. This is being live streamed, webcast abroad. There may not be that many, but there are people out there. And in future, we might use this as a means of communicating with others. Maybe we could set up two-way dialogues with people sitting in Nairobi or in Papua New Guinea, and they could feedback to us with questions and so on. So we might think of being more creative about using the time we have here to actually communicate with our compatriots who are not here with us, but who are very interested in what we're doing and have things to say, questions to ask that we can take on board here. So we need to think a little bit more about that. After the live broadcasts, the recordings are all chopped up and they've gone on the One Climate website, the IID website, and also on YouTube. So you can watch them later or direct other people to do that. Just one other announcement with regard to presentations. Many of you have been asking for what we do. They've been uploaded. You have received instructions. If you haven't read it, we'll send them out again on how you can access the presentations. They're all being uploaded. You will have access to all of them. Those that have been done already are already up, and you can access them. We've also been doing video logs this time and blogging. Thank you all for those of you who did blogs. I think quite a few people did blogs this time. These are all very useful. They've gone out through various channels, not just the IID channel. The blogs have been picked up by Reuters. Reuters have a wire service called AlertNet, which reaches thousands of people. And they have been picking up our blogs and sending them out to a much wider audience than just the ones that we would reach on our own. We have the Earth Negotiations Bulletin. This is not an innovation. We've used them all the time. It's extremely helpful to us. They will be producing the report of the conference, the official report of the conference, by Saturday and uploading it onto their website and sending it out through their email list, which reaches 100,000 people. So that's a huge outreach to a lot of people that will get to know about what we did here and be able to read about it. So that's a very valuable item that we would certainly want to retain in future. The last thing I'm going to say is with regard to, on the organizational side, is with regard to the next conference. We had 3 candidate countries put themselves forward, or people from those countries put themselves forward. The 3 countries were Nepal, Thailand, and Vietnam. We had a discussion about the pros and cons of each, and basically there are 2 criteria in choosing a country. The enthusiasm and capacity of the host organizations, because it is a huge task, as I'm sure you can recognize, to bring lots of people from all over the world and manage it. On the other hand, and then the second one is, which unfortunately is a consideration for us, is the ease of travel and getting visas and getting to a country, because we have people from all over the world. It wasn't easy to get visas for people from Africa and from Latin America to come to Bangladesh. Unfortunately, that's a general problem in many developing countries. Ease of travel and ease of getting permission like visas is a consideration. So after a lot of deliberation, we have actually come with a selection, and I'm pleased to announce that CBA 6, the 6th conference on community-based adaptation. Charles, did you want to make an intervention? Okay, but with that clarification, pending final confirmation by the government of the host country. The people who have come from that country have volunteered to do their best to get that permission, and on our behalf, I think we should be very glad that they have offered, and we accept their offer, and the country is Vietnam. So can we give a big hand to our Vietnamese friends? So to Phong and all our Vietnamese friends, thank you very much, and you don't know what you're getting into, okay? But don't worry, we'll be there to help you. Okay, I'm going to say just a couple more things in terms of reflecting on the content and the learning, and then I'm going to, as I said, open up the floor to you. The question I ask myself is, what is new in CBA 5? What have we learned? Have we gone beyond what we had a year or 2 ago? And I would say in several senses, yes. I've mentioned one in that we are now attracting brains from the academic community to come and engage with what has been largely a practitioner-driven process so far. That's a good thing. But are we learning? I would say in 2 senses we are. When we used to start, we had a lot of questions about what is CBA, is it different from this, or is it different from that? Those questions still remain. They will remain with us for a very long time. But I think we're getting better at the questions. And we are asking better questions. And one of the questions that we've evolved into is not what is CBA, but what isn't CBA. And we can tell what isn't CBA now. When we see a presentation and it's about development or it's about helping vulnerable people, but there's no connection to the climate change problem, then we can say that isn't community-based adaptation. It's a community-based project. It may be a very nice project, but it's not community-based adaptation. So we are now in a position to apply some kind of filters. And it's important to do this, as Hannah mentioned earlier, because if everything is called CBA and some things don't work, then people will say CBA doesn't work. Look at these projects, they were all CBA. They call themselves, just because they call themselves CBA doesn't make them CBA. So I think we as a community now have to start applying this filter, this razor. Do they qualify to be CBA or not? Just declaring something to be CBA is no longer going to be good enough. And we haven't found the mechanism of applying such a criteria, but we know that it exists and we need to start thinking about how we apply it. The second element of that is, I think the time now has come to invoke another layer of filter, and that is to distinguish between community-based adaptation to climate change, in this sense human-induced climate change, and community-based adaptation to climate variability. What we see now are largely the latter. We see very few of the former, but we're beginning to see them. And we need to learn from them. I'm not saying that the two, for the time being, I think the two can be kept under the umbrella, but we need to start thinking about how do we distinguish between community-based adaptation to climate variability. These are the things you do for floods, droughts, sea level rise, salinity, whatever, and human-induced climate change. There's a difference. We need to understand that difference. We need to figure out what that difference is, and we need to figure out, does that difference make any difference on the ground? And if so, how does that manifest itself? We don't have answers to this. The other questions that we've been talking about have been the theme of this conference, which is scaling up or upscaling. And we've been using a shorthand version of the two dimensions, which Atik introduced in the beginning. There is horizontal scaling up, which in the sense of replication, multiplication from the hundreds to the thousands to the millions. And then there is the vertical scaling up from the local level. And again, this is an issue with regard to the words we use. When we say community-based adaptation, we don't mean just working at the community level with communities. It is more than that. It is working at that level. It is working at higher levels. It is more of a community-centered adaptation rather than a community-based adaptation. But let's retain the word based and not quibble about it. But we understand conceptually that we are talking about more than just there. And this vertical integration, vertical upscaling is something that we had some very good discussions about. Examples at the national level of how local and national are beginning to work together. We had a very good example from Nepal, for example. And then how do we go to the global level? Because this is an issue that is at the global. They're going to be funding for adaptation to climate change at the global level in the billions of dollars. There may be a few billion already being made available. Those numbers will increase. The intention behind much of that giving from the people who give is to help poor people. That's the moral reason, the conceptual reason why they give the money in the first place. It ends up going to governments, to big projects, to UNDPs and the World Banks of the world. Whether it reaches poor, vulnerable people, we can have a very long debate about. But this community in this conference and the people who are associated with us have a lot of knowledge of working at that level with those communities. And it's time that we bring that knowledge to the global level, to the UNFCCC and the IPCC. And we're very glad to have the chair of the IPCC with us and representatives from UNFCCC here. We need to get the message to them. And in future, one of the things I think we need to think about is, I'll share a reflection with you on doing this because I've been trying to do this for a long time. We used to think, and I used to think, that what we needed to do is to get more of us, people, practitioners, to go to the UNFCCC COP. And we went in big numbers. Copenhagen, there were thousands of us. Doesn't make a jot of difference. We shout outside, we have side events, we network. They're useful to us. But if you think you're penetrating the innards of the negotiations, we are not. So my strategy has been, not very successful yet, but I am not going to give up, is to bring them to us. So in Cancun, I invited Christiana Figueres. I said, you have to come to Dhaka. It doesn't work here. This is negotiator territory and we can't enter. We have to bring the negotiators to us. She promised to come, and unfortunately, as these things happened, the Bangkok session came up and she had to go there. But she's sent us Yusuf Nasif on her behalf, which is good. I invited Farooq Khan, who was the chair of the Adaptation Fund Board. He again promised to come. Unfortunately, couldn't make it. I invited Ana Fornells, the new chair of the Adaptation Fund Board from Spain. She promised to come, couldn't make it. But I'm not giving up. I'll make them come, all right? We bring them here to us. Let them see what we are doing. Going there and shouting doesn't penetrate. They have impenetrable walls from the inner core of the negotiators to everybody else outside that. And it's very, very difficult to do that. We can network on the outside ourselves, but getting into it is not easy. But anyway, these are things that we have to work on. We have to get better at. And as Pablo says, the communication part of what we do, I think we have to get smarter and better at in using tools. So I'm going to stop there and now give the floor to you. We still have half an hour. We'll finish at 10:30 and then we need to be back here at 11 o'clock promptly for the final session. Who wants to kick off? A couple of minutes of reflections. As I said, if you have comments or criticism of the meeting, we want to hear them, but please send them to us separately and we will take them on board. Charles, you want to kick things? I see a hand at the back, yes. Can you come up to a microphone?
From Bangladesh. My comment is that we have seen the logo of the government and we have only had the presence of the Prime Minister here. Apart from that, we didn't see much involvement of the government in the whole process. And as we have mentioned that for the scaling up, it's important and it's evident that government should be part of this whole process. So I would recommend that from the next conference, especially in Vietnam and others, they would involve government very much, and government persons, especially those who were in charge of the different ministries, health or...
Thank you. Your point is made. We take it on board. Really, we do need to get more, and that was one of the discussions we had here, is that the non-governmental community cannot do this on our own. We're going to have to link with government, and we have not done much of that in the past. We did, I should point out, we did give government participants registration to this. We've been very strict on registrations. We gave the government a bunch of participant registrations. I'm very pleased to say some of them came. A lot of them didn't come. All right? So you can invite, but whether they come or not is not always sure. Craig, you wanted to make a point?
Thank you. I'd actually just like to echo some of the points that you were making. This is my first of these conferences, and I've been truly impressed by just the volume and the diversity and the vigor of the nascent CBA community. We are a vibrant community, and I'm very, very encouraged by that. And I think at this conference, I have felt there's a very strong shared awareness of the need for greater analytical rigor. This is the point that we have reached. You know, that we, to avoid the bandwagon pitfalls that have been discussed already this morning, I think we're clearly not there yet, but we have set our course in that direction. You know, and I think that's very, very encouraging. I think the tremendous intellectual horsepower that's gathered together here now are all heading in the same direction towards some shared frameworks and some shared definitions. And I look forward to an ongoing conversation, and I certainly look forward to seeing how far we've reached at the next conference. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Craig. There was a couple of hands at the back. Nick, and then at the lady. Nick?
Thanks again, Salim.
If you can find a microphone for you.
I've got one, I've
Sarah.
got one. Is it working? Yes. I too echo the things you said about community-based adaptation and community-based weather, you know, the weather focus, very important indeed. In terms of the scaling up, inevitably I'm going to repeat what I said in the parallel session, which is again repeated from what people have said about Rio. One was education was a big gap, and there's education at all levels, and we heard about it from Zambia as well, about that link there with tertiary education. But unless we get young people really on board on this, it's not going to happen. The other one was just a sort of wild suggestion, really. I'm inclined to these things. We thought about it for Cancun after Copenhagen, was maybe to send a message to the negotiators. Maybe the NGOs should boycott COPs on the next one, perhaps, just as and maybe oblige them to come back down to here.
Good point. I'm of the opinion that people thinking about going to the conference of parties and engaging, quality is more important than quantity. Just bringing a whole bunch of people doesn't do much good. Get somebody who's very good, knows how the process works, send that person, that's good enough. Before I give the floor to Sarah, let me just share one thing. This question of engaging with youth is very important, and we have thought about it, and I'll share with you something that we tried this time, which I didn't mention before. The British Council, who presented a few things that they've been doing at the dinner that they had on the 29th, have been holding a parallel meeting to ours at the British Council with about 50 to 100 young people, mostly university students. And we have been sending from here every day a few emissaries to that. And I'd like to invite one or two of them to maybe just tell us what... Pablo, would you like to just tell people what you did?
Thank you. Yes, Nick, I agree. We have to do more on that. And like Salim said of negotiators, that we have to bring the negotiators to us, the reality is that in addition to, of course, inviting some young people here, we have to go to them and spend time with them. It was fantastic. I'm really grateful for the organizers. I was given about 1 hour, and I played with them the game that we played here, where people had to move in one direction or the other to seek protection from flood or drought. The kids loved it. It was in the middle of the India-Pakistan game, and there were still like 25 of them. And I must say, I played this game 4 times. They were by far, the smartest collective strategists. I played this game at the World Bank meeting in Ethiopia. I played this game here. I played this game in Boston. In all cases, there was individual preferences that led consistently to the wiping out of half the team with the first disaster under climate change scenario. And in the youth team, when they saw that the climate had changed, they went for an extremely risk-averse version until they saw with more clarity what were the new probabilities. They have a lot to teach us, and I hope we can do more on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Pablo. Sarah, did you want to make your point now? And then I'll come to Ben. Ben, can you find a microphone, please?
Okay, so Sarah from Tier Fund. This morning, Tier Fund partners and Tier Fund staff got together. There are about 11 of us here, and Marcus Oxley's organisation is a close cousin of Tier Fund, so he was there too. So these opinions are not just mine, but we were questioning whether community-based adaptation is the right solution to the problem. I don't think it's just that we need to only call the right projects community-based adaptation, but that we should be talking about good development. So I think this has come about because donors and INGOs have to answer the question of how we spend international climate change adaptation money, but it's still wrong to just kind of get on some bandwagon and not really deal with and grapple with the real issues on the ground. So what we have come up with so far, but our thinking is really early, and I haven't been able to sleep this week because I've got so much going on in my mind, and I know there were others around the table at breakfast that were the same, is that we need a new kind of development and disaster that does inject climate science and adaptation options and emphasises strong ecosystems. So it's climate resilient and environmentally friendly and disaster resilient, but it's not necessarily just an adaptation project.
Fair enough, good comments. Ben, do you want to make yours?
Thank you. I've been thinking, first of all, I just want to thank the organizers very, very much for this opportunity. This is my first CBA, so I'm a newbie. And I really have enjoyed myself, and especially the field visit and these wonderful sessions. I've been thinking all along that we need a major paradigm shift. We're still thinking in modernist ways. We're not thinking in sort of post modernist or really in new ways.
You've lost everybody already, Ben.
Okay.
You're going to have to be able to speak to people in language they understand.
Okay, let me put it this way. We do need to think in new ways, and to help us think in new ways, Vietnam maybe offers an opportunity. The inaugural session had a religious leader, an Islamic religious leader who recited, and I don't know what he said, but I've been told by those who know that it had to do with the care of the earth. And I know that, for instance, within the tradition of engaged Buddhism, which you find in Vietnam, for instance, the thinker and the leader Thich Nhat Hanh, there is a lot of concern with care of the earth. So one suggestion I have is actually that we try to draw more systematically on groups of people, communities of practice and epistemic or knowledge communities that do engage with ecology and religion, with disaster and religion and so forth. I mean, I know there are many people here from some CBOs and NGOs that are faith-based, but it would be good to systematically reach out and try to explore what they write and think and how they communicate. So that's maybe a little bit more concrete, but that might give us a way of kind of re-engaging with human development in a way that I think helps us make that big leap in thinking.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm going to appeal to people to be short again, because we're going to try and take as many people. The more time you take, you are depriving somebody to speak. I've got Yusuf, Bujang, Nambi, in that order. Yusuf?
Thank you,
Make
Salim.
your point briefly if you can.
Yeah, I'll refer to your comments on bringing on board international organizations, IPEC and FCC, etc. Very good idea. To a large extent, that would be nevertheless preaching to the converted. In the end, the international process, which takes high-level policy decisions, including on funding, is dominated by parties. And I'm wondering if you would also consider bringing on board the main adaptation negotiators. In the end, it's almost just 20 people who meet in a small room, a contact group, and make all the decisions we are left with. In terms of COP decisions on adaptation. So if you really want this to be taken on board in the the international decision-making process, beyond the preambular language in which it resides now, then I think it would be a good idea to try to convert also the negotiators who make these decisions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. An interesting opportunity arises between now and the next meeting at Durban. We hopefully will have an adaptation committee, and then we might target them as our people to bring. Very good suggestion. Thank you. Bujang, and then Nambi, and then can I just see a few more hands over there, and there. Okay, we'll take some ladies next. Bujang?
Thanks, Salim. Just as a small suggestion, I think we have been working very hard in the last few days, and I'm sure that we have quite a few recommendations and quite a few suggestions that we could communicate to the global community. My suggestion is that we could kind of draft a crisp two-pager that could actually go into the AWG LCA and AWG KP chairs so that they could take it up in the next week's Bangkok discussions so that the voice of CBA is heard at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Bujang. Very good suggestion. In fact, there are quite a few people here who are going to go to Bangkok very soon. Can I see a show of hands? How many people are going to Bangkok? So there's several people here who will move from Dhaka to Bangkok and attend the AWG session there, and we can pass it on through them. So that's a very good suggestion. Who did I have next? Nambi.
Thank you, Salim. I enjoyed being here as usual. It's a great learning opportunity for me. But one thing what was missing is it's just a suggestion. I'm not very critical about it, but the scientific rigor was missing a bit. While the conceptual clarities are very important, it's important for us to support our activities with the kind of numbers what we put forth. That's far more. It speaks loud. Basically, that's very important. Perhaps this would evolve the distinctions what you talk about, CBA, human-induced climate change and variability, because when you're talking about human-induced climate change, the science has to come in there, basically. So some kind of a framework one should develop, and probably this could serve as a next topic area for our next Vietnam conference or something, to see the distinction together. Thank you so much.
Good suggestion. In fact, we don't have a theme for Vietnam yet, so if people have ideas on themes, let us know. I'll take some names that I don't know, just to show I'm not biased. Please, the lady over there. If you can introduce yourself.
My name is Emanuela from FAO Eastern Central Africa. My comment is I really appreciate, it's my first time to come for this conference, and I must say I've really appreciated and learned a lot. Besides that, I would like to say that it's really important in the concepts and the things which you've learned in terms of informing programming. So apart from just going up to the higher levels, one of the things I say it has helped me as a DRR officer is that it's going to really inform programming in terms of linking DRR and CBA in the field. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And then the lady behind, and then Srabani, and I'll take a few more over here. Yes.
My name is Lucy. I'm from Madagascar. I want to make a point about language we used in this conference. Yesterday we talked about knowledge management, and the day before about communication. And we discussed about the way we communicate and the languages we used. On last year's session, we had one session in French, and this year none. I think for this conference and beyond this conference, as it is growing and evolving, more and more people and more organizations who some don't speak English, it will be good if we start to think about translation facilities and translated tools. You couldn't imagine how tiring for us French-speaking people to listen and speak English and smile in English all the day. Thank you.
You did a very good job, and I do apologize. Last year in Tanzania, we did a session in French for the Francophone members of the audience and the participation. We were prepared to do it here, but we didn't get that many that didn't speak any English at all. There are a number of Francophones here, and I'm very, very pleased that several of them gave very good presentations in English. And we are extremely grateful to them, and we do apologize that we weren't able to provide in French. But if you understand English, then it does make sense to do it in English. Otherwise, it's... Srabani, I'll take Srabani, and then I'll move over to the other side of the room. Srabani.
Just 2 quick points, related to some things that have already been said. The other thing that I thought would be useful, maybe as part of the communication sessions, but how to engage with media and do some sort of media training. And, the opening inaugural, there was a lot of press, but then the rest of the conference, there was really no journalists or other media. And then the other thing that came up in our little group discussion this morning is, and this is not a question, but maybe a comment of whether we need to engage more with, at the community level, people who are working on mitigation, and whether we need to do more of the link between adaptation and mitigation at the rural community level as well.
Thank you. I have Marcus over there, and then the lady over there, and a few hands here. Marcus?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Liam. One thing I think you've done very well here, Salim, and credit to you and the organisers here, in that in the whole conference, what you've done essentially is you've created an intersection point. You've created a crossroads where people who are coming in from, whether it's a conservation perspective, an environmental perspective, a development perspective, a DRR perspective, you've created that space where we've come together and we've shared a learning and we've learned what other people are doing. And I think one of the things that becomes apparent is that when I listen to what the conservation people are doing or the natural resource people are doing, I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, this resonates very much with what I'm doing, but I'm calling it kind of DRR. And other people are saying, well, yeah, that's very similar. So what that occurs to me is that, the opportunity to scale up is really to try to bring about some harmonization and some coherency between the way that all these different groups are coming into this, because ultimately the convergent point, the integral of all this, is people. And at the backstop of all this is our environment. The ultimate feedback loop of all our mismanagement is ultimately the environment. And the environment is now coming up to hit us in the face on that, particularly around the climatic issue. So the opportunity there, and it goes back to that point you made about how to influence the system. You know, is it about increased lobbying at the top side of thing through the UNFCCC, and the conclusion you draw that, no, actually, we're not getting a great deal of progress there. Look at where the big democratic reforms have been in the world recently, and look at how that has come about, where people, where citizens, through their unrelenting, coordinated actions, have brought about the type of political reforms that we're all screaming out for. So the real opportunity to scale up is to harmonise and forge coalitions, forge alliances between the civil society movements, between the networks, and really put the pressure on the state to bring about the changes that we need.
Great, thank you very much. Can I just see a little bit more of a show of hands who wants to speak? I've got 5 or 6. You've got 2 minutes each. If you speak more than 2 minutes, then the other people, keep your hands up. They are the ones you're depriving of. You're actually taking their time, okay? So don't take extra time. The lady over here. Yes, you, please.
Thanks, Salim. My name is Agnes, and I'm from K Austria. I wanted to comment on what you said earlier on us having to be more analytical than descriptive, and I really agree on this point, especially with a view to how we deal with social inequalities in our work on community-based adaptation. And more particularly on gender equalities. I think that it was really good we had this first session on gender here in this 5th Community-Based Adaptation Conference. And I really welcomed that. The core question was, how can we move on from just talking about the need to integrate it and become more practical about it? I think that in order to move from descriptive to analytical, we have to really get to the core of gender inequalities and social inequalities and not just describe our actions and not just think that just because we target women and we work with women, we're doing gender. At the moment, I see that most of our work on gender is really just touching on the superficial symptoms of gender inequalities, and we need to become a little bit more courageous in addressing the underlying political issues.
Good. Thank you very much. The gentleman in front of you, please. And then we
she just said it all.
Oh, well done. Thank you very much. Back. Yes.
As a practitioner, I think many of the scaling up lessons that I learned today were around connections and linkages. So how do we link adaptation with mitigation, DR with adaptation, between scales, with baseline development and with the private sector. And I think it was very interesting that many presentations, they went through a strategic analysis of who are the different actors laterally and horizontally, and how do you reach these people. And I found that communication skills as their own technical sector for me are quite critical, and I greatly appreciate all that. So for me, connections is a very important part of scaling up in all dimensions.
Thank you. I'll go from right to left on my scale. Paula, if you can find a microphone, please. Those of you at the back, if you want to speak, find a microphone.
Hi, Paula from IDS. I just wanted to share with everyone a main issue of concern after this wonderful conference, and is that I think that we should not forget that we have learned a lot in the last 50 years of development, and that most of the discussions that we have had about gender, scaling up, national policy, integration, working together, we've been struggling with those for many years, and that we really need to do our homework and learn those lessons and focus our efforts of the additional dimension that climate change brings rather than repeating the same mistakes. Thanks.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, Lucy? Please find a microphone. If you don't have a microphone, then you won't be able to speak.
Thank you. I'm Lucy from Kenya. There was Nusi from Madagascar. This is Lucy. We're the same height. We look a bit similar. But my learnings, I would just want to say 2 things. My learning here has been the need for the knowledge management of CBA and driving that from building the capacity of that knowledge. I think there's a lot of assumption in our programs that we know that we are implementing CBA project, but I think we need to intentionally determine what is that base knowledge that goes into those programs and goes to the community so that they're not confusing what they're doing with a myriad of, even though there is an intersection on the ground, but they understand the intentions of the program. But number two also is to talk about the scaling up of the capacity, of the adaptive capacity. How do we measure that indeed we are equipping our groups and ourselves with the adaptive capacity on those programs? And perhaps those might be a scaling up need that we all need to grow into. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes, if you can find a microphone, please.
Ibe Ludi from ODI. I think looking forward is extremely important, but I think we should also look back a little bit. How much have we done on, say, community-based natural resource management, and how much is still going on in that field? Why did it suddenly sort of peter out that no one is talking about those approaches and projects anymore? So I think we should learn from previous experiences and previous schools in development as well as looking forward.
Good point. Thank you. Yes, the lady over here.
I'm Nela. I work with CARE in Peru. And so my learning from this conference is that even climate change challenges are wide differently in every part of the world, that the human challenges from climate change are the same. And I really don't know how many people of Latin America actually attended this conference, but I am sure that we're finding the same challenges on safety nets and livelihoods. So I think it's really a very good opportunity to scaling up in that sense.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to see we have more Latin Americans. We tried very hard to get people from Latin America, but it wasn't always easy. The lady over here, and then Ben, and then I'll come to Ramsey. Yeah.
Hello, I am Anna from FAO. I would like to flag out one of the main things I've learned in this conference. We have been talking about CBA, about CBA to climate variability, CBDRR, CBNRM, but what I really believe that will ultimately work at local level is the adoption of an integrated approach and integrated in the context of development.
Thank you for that reminder. Ramsey? Sorry, and then Ben.
Thank you. My name is Ben from Uganda. As we finish discussions and focused purpose, there are things we need to note throughout the discussions, especially on agriculture, and actually when we talked about health, we noted that in most poor countries, the public sector is overwhelmed and it cannot actually provide to all the desired needs of the communities. So we talked about private sector, and we understand the business community actually is doing a lot of work in terms of actually helping communities to adapt to climate change. So the question has been, what kind of incentives are we providing actually to interest the private sector, the business community, to scale up their efforts? How can we make sure that they start to realize that whatever they are doing is contributing to climate change adaptation? Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. We do need to also think about private sector in addition to governments, youth, and faith-based communities. Ramsey?
Thanks, Salim. Ramsey from the European Climate Foundation. First, thank you for inviting me. It's been very, very interesting. I'd like to suggest a topic or a question for the next conference, and it builds off, I think, the one of this, which is how do we scale up? But I think what's going to be increasingly relevant is how do you prioritize across different adaptation or CBA projects? I think it's an issue which national governments face, it's an issue which local governments face, donors face, the adaptation fund faces at a global level. And I think as the CBA community becomes more analytically rigorous and starts to actually scale up and get more projects, that's going to be a really interesting question. So
Thank you.
That's just a suggestion.
Nice suggestion. Prioritization. How do we do that? We have time for one or two more. Yes, the lady over there. and then Richard.
Hello, I'm Hương from Care Vietnam. This is really great opportunities for me to join this conference, and yeah, we discussed a lot about climate change and its impact. But really, in this conference, I don't really see that people really dig on the migration, and I think that's a really big problem in the future, because now you can see that right in Bangladesh, a lot of people lost their land. So yeah, maybe in the next conference we have to consider that more and have more discussion. Thank you.
Good point. Migration, another emerging issue that we have to take on board. Richard, and then I'll come here.
Okay. Much of my work involves reviewing work that we do with farmers. And really for them, there is no CBA, there's no DRR, there's no UNFCCC, there's just fast, medium, and slow onset climate risks and many other risks. And many of these interact with each other as well. So I think how sort of CBA and climate change risks work with other risks, I think, is something that we need to be thinking about, as well as scrapping the divisions between the silos that we're creating. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Over here, and then we'll go back. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Keshav. I'm from Nepal, and it was a good opportunity to find out and learn the practices that has been developed throughout the world from the more than 60 countries. And from this conference, there are some parallel sessions, but that are very much important to be included in the plenary, such as the concept of gender and the health, because these are important for all. And especially the learnings and some approaches that can be useful to adopt for us to upscale some technologies that we are doing in Nepal. And the challenge and the work we all need to do is to how we can develop mechanisms, innovations or interventions that harness the opportunity of community knowledge as well as the science. So if we all collaborate, they're just saying that if 1,000 spiders unite, they can trap a lion. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. I should also mention that Keshav did a very nice blog on his field visit. I recommend everybody read it if you can. Over there, I'll take the two ladies, yes. You need to find a microphone if you want to speak. Yes.
I assume you mean this lady.
Judy.
I'm Andrea Young. I'm a social planner from Australia. I've come here to learn from people who are operating at the grassroots level about the social impacts of climate change adaptation. In considering scaling up, what I've seen here are that so many issues are associated with access to land and access to resources. And I'd just suggest to you, in considering the next conference and engaging in scaling up, to take into account the importance of the land use planning system. I think that's a really important area for you to be engaging with government and exploring in terms of addressing some of the basic injustices and inequalities in accessing resources, and particularly the migration issue.
Good suggestion. Thank you very much. Yes.
I'm Marilyn from Department of Agriculture, Philippines. Coming over, I learned a lot, and I learned that NGO has done more, and it's a challenge for the government now to do more to fortify what the gains or what the NGO has done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, a couple of last ones, and then I'll give the last word to our colleagues from Vietnam. Yes. The lady over there.
Okay, I think building upon what other people have said, the running theme throughout this conference has been that we're all doing very similar things, whether we're terming it CBA, CBDRR, CBDRM. And actually, I think rather than the theme of prioritizing, which we're then contributing to creating silos again, it should be about integration, which is what we've all been talking about and reiterating. And so building upon Marcus's points, I think we should be actually looking at how we're bringing all these communities of practice together and actually integrating to create that stronger voice in order to create change and upscale.
Good suggestion. We may hold a vote on it. Yes, the lady over here.
Thank you. I'm Nahau from Papua New Guinea. I came to Bangladesh a week ago with an empty bag. As I leave tonight to go back to Papua New Guinea, I must say, and I'm very thankful, that I will be taking back with me a bag full of knowledge, experience, interaction with a lot of you have given me a very important information about CBA, about climate change, and the connection way to seek funding and assistance, and I shall take that to my country and spread the good words to more people. And I want to thank all the organizers for making it possible for me to be here for this week. It's been a wonderful and enjoyable week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent testimonial. Okay, we have last two hands over there. If you can come up to a microphone. If the first person can be brief, the second person gets to speak. If you're not brief, the other one doesn't get to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the CBA has been very interesting, considering that I also was able to attend the one for Dar es Salaam. But one thing that I would like to recommend is that we should have more posters. The posters upstairs was nice, but going upstairs was a bit difficult. So I think next time we can make use of, on the sideways we can have posters, and on our way, as we're going to have coffee, we can also have posters. Because we realized there was a lot of fatigue yesterday when we were doing presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last one, the lady at the back. Yes.
I would like to thank everybody, starting with the organizers, for giving, I would say, all of us this opportunity, and for giving me the opportunity, because this is the first time I make it, to this type of conference. I learned a lot. I got confused a lot also.
Join the club.
But one thing that I really get, and that I'm very, that I believe really in, is that everybody in this room is now, I think, climate change adaptation sensitive. Mm-hmm. I think Dr. Atik has said it the first day during his inauguration speech. Climate change is the greatest threat human beings face, which means that we all here, I'm sure, are concerned. But beside ourselves being in this room, everybody should be concerned. So to me, the most important thing is spreading the word. Spreading the word, we have a lot of channels, we have a lot of strategies, but we should spread the word so that everybody concerned acts accordingly, no matter where they live in the world, no matter what position they occupy, no matter what they do. I think everybody can do something. So it's about spreading the word. It's about making everybody act, because we are all concerned.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent note to finish on, and I'm going to let our Vietnamese friends have the last word. We'll start in front, and then you want to go first, and then Phong. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Thanh. I'm from Vietnam. At the very beginning of the discussion, you mentioned about the distinguish between the natural and human causes of climate change. So I haven't seen a lot of discussion on the private sector. I commend that we should bring them exposed to the forum. It might be help for the CBA in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Phong, last word.
It's very interesting to be the last person. I just, to be quick, just to say my personal feelings. First of all, I say I'm very moved to see the films made by the young people in different countries like Nepal and Bangladesh, because what we've heard in Vietnam, we're only concerned about the Vietnamese issues. So now I've learned that in other countries, especially through the video, that in Africa, in other countries in Asia, a lot of people are suffering and also will be suffering in the future. So I think that it's a very motivating factor for all of us to learn, to unlearn, to act. That is the first thing, and thanks very much for the exposure, although I couldn't go join the field trip. The second one is that for the Vietnamese team here, we have quite a few people from the government, from the researcher agency, from NGO, so I think for the Vietnamese team, we already have a lot of discussion among ourselves, and I'm sure that when we come back to Vietnam, we will continue to work together and have better understanding of each other. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Let's go for tea, coffee. It's going to be outside the ballroom, and try and be back here as quickly as you can. We'll hope to start at 11 if we can.